Привет. I'm Chuck Olinik. I'm a Ukrainian-American who was baptized with the name Yaroslav, which is also the name I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism. And I grew up speaking Ukrainian in the house and was told by my immigrant parents to embrace the Ukrainian culture. And that led to me being a history teacher, and I guess I got fascinated with history. But I also found myself exploring folklore. And I've been putting together a series on YouTube on this channel about various aspects of Slavic mythology and Slavic folklore. And I did previous videos on this spirit-haunted world that the Slavs lived in, as far as, there were spirits in the waters, like the Rusalka, who could lure a man to his doom, or the Leshy in the forest, or the Bolotnik in the swamps, and then there's spirits of the meadows. And you would think, well, maybe there's safety in your own home. No, in the ancient Slavic world, or the pagan Slavic world, there wasn't. There were spirits that haunted those places. And that's what we're going to take a look at in this video. But first, you got to figure out where the Slavs lived. Okay. In Ukraine and in Poland, a peasant would live in a Khata, a house, or at a cottage. In Russia, it's called an Izba. And the whole farmstead would have an enclosed garden, and there'd be a hay shed, and a barn, and there would be a bathhouse, a banya. And guess what? There's spirits in all of those places. The Russian Izba would be often made from locally cut, rough-hewn logs fitted together with a hand axe, and to ensure the wealth and health of the people living there, coins, wool, frankincense were customarily placed in the corners. In the tree-poor steps, wattle and daub construction was used, and there'd be a thick layer of plaster that was mixed. There was a mixture of clay and sand and water, and it was supplemented with some chopped straw and horse or cow dung to prevent the plaster from cracking as it dried. And at first you'd have a coarser layer placed over the insulated walls, and then a finer layer, and on this finer layer there, patterns would be painted. In Ukraine, they'd also use like a steep thatched roof. It was made of rye straw, because apparently this stuff was really durable. And if a roof was properly maintained, it would last like 50 years. And it was pretty waterproof. It also kept the heat in. The Khata would have a regular plan of 2 rooms. There's the Mala Khata, and the little house, and then there's the Velika Khata, the big house. And in the Mala Khata, the little house, the smaller room, that's where the family hung out, and that's where the daily life pretty much took place, as far as cooking and laundry and just all sorts of stuff. And in that room would also be the giant stove called a peach. There was an earthenware stove, and maybe it would be covered in tiles, maybe not. So this is where the food prep is going to take place, but also it sits high enough up where the children could sleep, and the family elders could sleep, retaining the heat. Also, this was kind of like a center for ancestor worship. Like the ancestors were supposed to reside in the peach. So it's like the spiritual center of the house and family. And it makes the fire in the stove, a sacred fire. And that's got all sorts of honor that's supposed to go with it. And That recalls the idea that if the fire was being kindled, you were not supposed to make loud noises or swear or whistle because, hey, that's not kulturne and that'll get you hit. So the Velika Khata, that's the bigger of the two rooms. That normally doesn't get used. On the east corner or the east wall, there would be a beautiful corner or a red corner, and that would be where shrines were and later icons during the Christian era are going to go. And so you would have household gods represented as, tiny little statuettes, and they're like niches in that area. And there would be embroidered linens, rushniks. There would also be arrangements of dried flowers. And the room was occasionally used to welcome guests or provide accommodations for guests, and also on ceremonial occasions. And so now we've got the setting for household spirits. Well, now we got to talk about the first of these household spirits. The Ukrainians would call him a Domovik, and the Russians would call him a Domovoi. The Domovik, his name's literally like one of the household or lord of the house. And he's a household spirit of a given kin or the kin's fountainhead ancestors. And some people think that this originated before Christianity. So that would like connect with the god Rod. And some people think like, oh no, that started up after Christianity, and this is the fall of Lucifer's followers from heaven, and some land in the forests and some land in the waters, and some made it to the farmsteads and homes and lived there amongst people and eventually grew less evil. So that's why it's actually okay to, you tolerate the Domovik. As a matter of fact, if the Domovik chooses to leave, that's bad for the family. So you want him to stay. So there's that curious little thing of, yeah, he's a spirit, but this guy's okay. And he was believed to protect the well-being of the kin in all its aspects, especially looking out for the children and the animals. And he shares in the joys and the sorrows, and apparently is also able to predict future events like imminent death of a kin person, or plagues or wars. So he's supposed to be aware of the bad stuff going on and be protecting the family. So where does Domovik live? He could be usually around the peach, the oven. Sometimes he could be living under the doorstep. Sometimes he could be dwelling in the hearth itself. You're not really going to see him very often. He's usually pretty active at night, so it's sort of like a cat, zooming around the house in the middle of the night. If you do happen to see him, he's going to look like a guy with a gray beard, got flashing eyes. He's really hairy. In some accounts, he might have, a tail, and little horns. There's also the idea that he might look like the master of the house. And there are accounts where he might, for instance, there are accounts of him being seen right outside the house in the household garden, just puttering around when the master of the house wasn't actually there. So let's see, he could also manifest as a cat or a dog or a bear, which I think you would notice in the house. And in some traditions, maybe even turn into a snake. And so you got the shape-shifting thing going on. You never address him directly, or you never talk about the Domovik, did or didko, or grandfather, or little master, Maybe if he's in his snake form, you might call him Zmek. Sometimes he's given like a name, but you don't address this guy because that's bad. So the little master or the grandfather, he's able to hear whispers in the house, so he knows when you're going to be talking about him. All right, so just be careful. He also really hates loud noises. That goes back to that thing where you're not supposed to be making loud noises, around the hearth, around the peach. You got to leave his favorite food out for him, and if you don't, expect some crockery that breaks, expect some upset animals. You're not going to be able to find things that you're looking for because he has decided to hide them from you to kind of give you a hint that you're not doing the right thing. He's got a real jealous nature. He's especially watchful of poultry and poultry products. Those are amongst his favorite foods, which I'll kind of get to. And he's going to get really, really irritated if you give a larger portion of his favorite meals to another one of the spirits that inhabit the farmstead. And so it gets real cranky. So about once a week, you were supposed to offer libations of grain and a portion of any meal that contained any poultry products. All right, new farm animals, got to get introduced to him, and you have to start figuring out what's his favorite color of animal, and then you've got to basically try to collect the whole set and make sure that your animals are that one color, because that's going to keep him fairly mellow. And if he's well fed and you're doing these other things, he's going to protect the house, protect the family. He's going to warn the hosts of dangers. For instance, if the wife suddenly feels her hair being pulled, she's being told, your husband's about to beat you. So something's got to change. There might be sobbing that's heard if you're going to have a family member, death is approaching a family member. You would have to do various sacrifices to the Domovik. If you behave badly, like I said, things break and stuff disappears. If you behave real bad, he may try to leave. And if he abandons the house, you're in deep trouble. So there are accounts of the master of the house leaving because he has to make a journey, and the wife actually blocks up the front of the peach, the front of the oven, to keep the Domovik, from leaving, because he's going to follow him down the road. Since the Domovik doesn't like to be left alone, there is a custom called sitting in the lane, where the master of the house, before embarking upon a journey, customarily sits in silence outside the home. And I think this is an attempt to kind of fake out the Domovik, because the Domovik might freak out and try to run away or try to follow the master down the road. Now, if you move into a new place, you've got to encourage the Domovik to move in with you. And the way you do this is you have this newly built house and you invite the Domovik in, where reciting the formula, our supporter, come into the new house to eat bread and obey your new master, and you're supposed to offer up, a cock or some type of poultry, and just say, come on, you're living with us now. By the way, the little fellow or the grandfather has his own special day, March 30th. That's when he sheds his winter skin. and he grows a new lighter one for the rest of the year. And I guess at that time he gets pretty cranky and he's subject to fits of bad temper. Now, that's just one spirit that affects the Slavic household. I'm going to cover the rest of them in the next video. I hope you stick with me.